So let's go to the table. The title is Residency Program: Long-Term Investment for Artistic and Social Development. So it kind of frames what we would like to discuss or start to discuss with this roundtable. Basically, what I would just like shortly to say shortly for the introduction is this: that we can notice, especially in the last 10-20 years, a vast development of the residency programs throughout Europe, and more understanding thanks to the different partnerships on local, regional, and transnational level. The residency program became an essential part of artistic mobility and cultural exchange, but also are becoming an important tool of rethinking the arts and culture in general and its role in society of today. Many would claim, and I'm sure we will hear more about it from our speakers, that residency programs strongly affect the broadening of artistic practices because they act as a platforms for communication and exchange with a local context, much more than usual representational forms as festivals, exhibitions, and similar. If not for any other reason, it's just because the artists stay longer and usually communicate with people. Therefore, we think also and would support that not just to mentioning and stressing the artistic value, which of course needs to be mentioned, but also the value or the broader role as a social practice of residency programs must or needs to be examined. Anyhow, as we can basically agree that residency programs are important, nevertheless, we believe that we need to re-examine and rethink and re-argue the reasons for investments in them, to understand in particular what are the specificities of residency programs and why do we need them, as said again, from the perspective of both of cultural policies and broader social policies. So I will basically stop here for now, and first I would like to introduce Miss Annemarie Türk on my left-hand side, who is an independent curator and consultant from Vienna, with a great experience as a production manager, worked with various theaters and festivals in Austria. And here, most of us probably know Ms. Türk as from Kulturkontakt Austria, which she was involved in many things, but also in artists in residency programs, and many artists from this region been to these programs. And Ms. Annemarie,
among in the audience.
I'm sure. So, please take the mic. Do you want it like this or in the hands?
Yeah, hello, and thank you for inviting me. I always like to come to Zagreb again, even more if I can meet former artists in residence of the Kulturkontakt Austria residence program. I would like to start shortly with the situation in Austria, because the situation in Austria is describing very well the development we can see all over Europe, what's going on with residence programs. Residence programs have become popular, very fashionable, and also in Austria. When I overlook the development of the cultural scene and the cultural policy in our country for the last 15-20 years, then I have to confirm this phenomenon. 3 decades ago, we only had residencies for Austrian artists abroad, in Rome, in Paris, in New York, initiated and funded by the federal ministry, sometimes also by provinces. But incoming residencies, it was only the city of Graz which were set up the first initiative to invite artists to a residence stay in the Styrian capital. Max Aufischer is among us, and he will tell you tomorrow more about this very successful initiative. And nowadays, I can count many residency programs all over Austria. in all the capital of the provinces, in Innsbruck, Salzburg, Linz, Krems, Vienna. And these programs have been started by the art administration of the cities, the provinces, the federal ministry, and artists in association, and not to forget by private companies. This is very astonishing due to the not very developed tradition of private sponsorship in our country, but private companies are offering some of the most interesting residence programs we have. Today we can say there is a balance between outgoing and incoming, and this is a development we can be very satisfied of. Of course, we also ask ourselves why this sudden interest of public funds as well as private ones in such programs to support artists. We know very different reasons to start such programs, and not only because it has become fashionable. Many of these programs have very different profiles due to the different reasons to start it. Maybe cultural administrations have learned the lesson that the individual support is very often more sustainable than big exchange programs. It is not so bureaucratic, not so expensive, but more sufficient in the way of starting long-lasting contacts and collaboration. Sometimes it's only the international reputation you can get out of inviting artists from abroad, which is a motive to start these programs. Very often we are faced with very pragmatic reasons, very often of little communities, little towns and cities, to start such programs also for social development of the community. And these programs are not always guided by the idea of serving the art and the artist. They are more interested in the social development. I don't want to be cynic. This is a fact we are faced with, and we have to accept it. And I guess we can work with, but we have to be very realistic. And we have to be aware of these approaches. I worked for Kulturkontakt for more than 20 years and could set up and develop and run artist in residence programs. And I did it as a host. But my point of view was always that of the artists. And looking back, I can say this was not the worst advisor for developing such a program, only to be oriented to the needs and wishes of the artists. This doesn't mean not to consider the needs and the wishes of the funders, the hosts, the local communities, but the most important aspect for us has always been the point of view of the artists. We were very lucky, I had to say. We were in a very privileged situation. We had the money, and no influence was taken on the development of this program. This is very rare, and it is really a privilege to work in this way. And so we can start various programs, first of all for visual artists, followed by ones for writers and literary translators, and finally for dancers and choreographers. Until the end of 2012, we hosted 500 artists from Central, Eastern and Southeastern Europe. Maybe I should add this, people from Croatia knows it, but all the other international guests, our program was exclusively dedicated to this region. And this was the only thing which was given by the ministry, by the funder, to develop a program for this very special cultural exchange. I would like to share with you the learning process, how to create this program, and what was successful for the participating artists, for the local community, the funders, and last but not least for us, for the host. What were the outcomes, and what can be done better, and what should be done in future. We started 1992 with a small program for the visual artists, and I can say we learned with every artist who participated in the country. It was really an ongoing learning process, and this was the biggest adventure we had. There were very pragmatic things we had to learn, to find the right apartments, the right studios, the right working spaces. We had to take care of the artists, their wishes and needs, to offer contacts to the local cultural scene, to organize exhibitions, readings, performances, whatever was needed, and how to get in touch with the Viennese scene, which was in those days, in the beginning, a very close one, and it was not so easy to find partners. Another question was how to interest the media in this, which is important for the success of such a program. And interesting was that it was easier to get international reputation and acceptance than the local one. This was also surprising for us, but it was more demanding than anything else. We met with this program from the very beginning, a big interest in the region, and then we had to learn very quickly how to select and how to organize the selection process. Not only to be transparent, only to do it in a very serious and proper way. And I guess this is also a very important factor for the success of such a program. We decided to, from the beginning to work with international juries, not only to trust in Austrian experts, also to invite experts from abroad, mainly from the region where the artists are from. We don't want to be so ignorant to neglect their experience and their knowledge of the art scene, which was anyway better than ours. So the first years was very hard for us to find the right partners in Austria, and then we decided we will do our own thing. We started our own exhibition spaces, published our own books, and organized our own literary festivals and readings. And via these initiatives, we finally could find very potential partners, mainly in the private sector. Many companies came to us asking for further cooperation, and then we were able to enlarge the program and to offer to the artists much more than at the beginning. I guess it is very important for the program and for the participating artists to offer them a broad audience. Not only to give them the time of self-reflection, of working, of searching for new impulses, also to present their work. And this is then a promise for the whole program. So the audience, a broad audience is always a promise for the program. And thank you. 20 years are long, and sometimes I forgot that finally they are short time. what was very important to us has always been not only to work with the artists for the moment, for the 3 months mostly they were in Austria. It was always important to us to take care of these relations, yeah, and to look for other opportunities to come together again and to continue these new cooperations. And I guess this is also an important factor we have to be aware of. And in many cases, I can say we were really successful with this. And now I'm not anymore at Kulturkontakt, and I'm working as a freelance curator, and I have still the benefit of these former relations, and I'm still working with the artists. It was always very, very nice. So a last sentence, for example, how to develop this sustainability. We also produced books, multilingual books with texts of these writers in residence. We produced exhibitions and catalogs, video editions, whatever. So to have, really can document what happened in this program and which opportunities are given to the artists, to the hosts, and to the local communities. And maybe later on I would tell you another example how to work with the local community, but maybe later on. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Türk. I have many questions, yes. But let's keep them for later, and of course there will be, I'm hurrying up everybody. We promised 10 minutes, now we gave 15 actually, so we can have some conversation afterwards. So, Ms. Claude Veron, thank you for joining us. Now president of Jeunes Talent Cirque Europe, that's my French, teacher and production manager for dance companies in Belgium. Claude is quite known friend and a very active member of European cultural community, being engaged in various networks and organizations. For many years he was the director of European Papinière, probably the most relevant for this discussion, dedicated to the promotion of artistic mobility and emerging artists. Mr. Veron was also spent several years here in Zagreb and comes quite often, so I'm sure he's also quite familiar with what is going on here. Please, Claude.
Yes,
take
thank
that.
you. Thank you. Sorry. Yes, thank you, Emina. Yes. Like everybody, thank you to invite me. And for me, it's a real pleasure to come back after 12 years in Zagreb, because I'm still 2.5 years here, like a director of the French Institute, and I keep some friends. What means? From this morning and also tomorrow morning, the draft of Res Artist, you put the finger on all the questions it's able to put when you want to go in residencies if you are artist, and when you want to organize a residencies. And the working group develop something is very nice, no problem. But now the question is, what kind of residency or what kind of program of residencies do you want to build, or what kind of residency I want to go? It's very important. You have school, you have so many questions, it's very important. Okay, now it's very important to have for determination to know exactly where I want to go and what I want to build. Give you some example of 2 programs of residencies built not in the same time, one at the end of the 80s and another one on the beginning of 2000. One is Pépinière européenne pour jeunes artistes, and the other one is Jeunes Talent Cirque Europe, Circus Next. These 2 program of residencies is built on the same objective, not on the same time, but the same objective. The first objective, it's a program to support the creation of artists, and more especially the emerging artists. And also the question of mobility in a country named Europe. The question of mobility in Europe at the end of 18th is not completely easy. The question of Europe on the end of 80 is not completely easy. And the question of emerging artists on the end of 80 also is not completely easy. And we have on Pépinière, and also because Pépinière, it's all the kind of discipline, artistic discipline, from architecture in Graz, for example, and for literature, for music, from dance, and visual artists, and choreography, and so on. Jeunes Talents Cirque Europe, it's only on contemporary circus. And contemporary circus on the way of the French definition. Sorry for that. But it's not a succession of tricks. It's and you know this kind of contemporary circus in Zagreb because you have a very good festival on contemporary. And he's not totally my friend, but I like Ivan. We have some trouble with Ivan, but never mind. He make a good work, and he invite very important company of circus. It's this kind of artists we want to support, and it's not on the beginning of the 2000 not easy also. And first of all, emerging artists, especially for the circus, author, les auteurs. Everybody understand author. That's not a trick, but a piece with scenography, with dramaturgy, and so on. Second one, it's very important also, it's more the political level. It's to help some partner all over Europe to be involved on the question of residency. It's a proselytism to develop this kind of tool. And also the third question, it's the question of to build this kind of program, it's based exclusively in cooperation with partners. It's not only the head of Jeunes Talents Cirque or Pépinière Européenne in Paris, but it's a work together to build the program and to have the same approach for residencies. It's very important to develop and to be after a real platform to host residency for emerging artists. Emerging artists is not a young artist. You can say young artists because often, to find money you go more on the side of youth, Ministry of Youth, okay. You say, okay, it's a youth artist, but in fact, it's not only youth, it's emerging, it's the first, we are completely involved in this question, it's the first good production in professional landscape. It's the definition of Jeunes Talents Cirque Europe and also Pépinière Européenne pour jeunes artistes. And also, it's another topics we are in common. It's to provide ground for the artists, for the production, and to provide also accommodation and so on and so on. We have the same conception of residency. Not only a place, a key, not. It's a ground, place, some person we are able to have a reflection, some person to have feedback about the creation and so on and so on. And also, one of the most important of the question of the platform of professional, it's also the possibility after to develop the network of the artists we are invite in residencies. It's very important. One of the best example, it's a Croatian artist. We are in Jeunes Talent Cirque Europe in 4 years ago with a piece, his name Room 100. He was support, he have a grant, he make a project, and after, with all the platform of partner on contemporary circus, but the platform of contemporary circus in Europe is not so huge. Okay, but with Room 100, she make, I don't remember exactly the name of performance, but she are going in all the, not all, but 10 or 12 festival of contemporary circus, because it's also the network of partners. And I don't speak so much, perhaps. And also, I want to say something very important. The program like that, like Jeunes Talent Cirque Europe or Circus Nest, it's biodegradable. You understand what I mean? Biodegradable? It's built for a time, it runs a certain time, but after 20 years, for example, Pépinière Européenne pour Jeunes Artistes don't work like in the end of 18 now. It work another profile. It's work only like a platform, and all the partners from the beginning, when I leave the Pépinière, we are approximately 30 residencies all over the Europe, except in Croatia, sorry, but also in Quebec. And now the program, like a program, don't function. But all the residencies we are involved, it's a political level, in this time, works now like a resident project, and often on the website of Pépinière Européenne, you can see this place, make a call for proposal for that, for that, for that. And you can also have some connection with, where is the girl from the partner in Netherlands? Where is it? Perhaps he's leaving. Okay, sorry. And also perhaps in a res artist, because we have some partner, we are partner also in the network res artist. And after, Pépinière Européenne pour Jeunes Artistes build another project. His name, I don't remember the name. It's Park in Progress. You have another program for video and so on and so on. And he keeps the same thing, emerging artist project in collaboration. It's the same thing also with Jeunes Talent Cirque Europe. The first program is 2001 and 2. Pépinière Européenne is born in the independent project with independent association, but Jeunes Talent Cirque Europe is born with an impulsion and of the Ministry of Culture of the French during, because it's French, we like very much the year of, and 2001 and 2 is the year of circus. And during these years of circus, one person from the ministry, she worked with me before in Pépinière, and she said to the minister, oh, wow, we have a good idea, residencies for emerging artists, and she built a project, but it's not the ministry we organize. He make a producteur délégué with a structure, and this structure became independent, and now it's an independent organization. It's named Jeunes Talent Cirque Europe, and the project is named Circus next now. But on the same level, is on the same spirit he built, and the project in 2001 and 2 is not totally the same on the form that the new project now we are built to 2013 until 2016. It's not different, but it's working in progress because it's not the same time. There are new partners, for example, for the next program. On the beginning, we involved so many partners on the north of Europe because it's more easy, because it's the beginning of contemporary circus in Finland, Sweden, in England, a little bit in Belgium also. And politically, we decide for the last program to go forward for the south, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and so on. We work Republic Czech, and it's not a very strong organization, but with this kind of project, with solidarity for money, solidarity for know-how, solidarity for the platform, you can keep your political level to develop contemporary circus in Europe. Okay, fine.
Thank you, Claude. Thank you very much. I'm sure we're going to continue more. Now when we talk about the ministry, yes, I would just ask you to just exchange because of the technical, just for now. Thank you very much. Here with us we have Miss Ivana Podnar from the Ministry of Culture. Actually the person who worked a lot with us, with the Sonia, on programming this conference, but also person in ministry actually, don't worry, dedicated to developing residency programs in Croatia, and a person also engaged in open method of coordination group of European Commission concerning the mobility and the theme of residency. So please.
Thank you, Emina. I'm glad to be here, and hopefully we'll be more have more capacity for development of residencies in Croatia. So I'd like to present one project that I initiated within the Ministry of Culture. Actually, it was an attempt to map residencies from the position of the artist as well as from the position of the art organization in Croatia. So when I say it was an attempt, I wouldn't say that we got some final results, since the feedback was around 40 answers, 24. It was, I think, 17 organizations and around 20 artists that sent us their answers, but somehow it just traced some important problems, and it pointed to some important questions which are on both levels, as on the level of participating, on the level of organizing, as well as on the level of financing residencies. So here are some, you can see some of the indicators that are the results of the financing of the Ministry of Cultures from the year 2010 till the 2013. And these indicators are showing actually how the budget for the residencies within the budget for the international cultural cooperation were increased during this period, as well as the relation between the budget of the Ministry of Culture within the GDP of the Croatia. So actually the trends are showing, as we all unfortunately know, the decrease of financing of the GDP, but actually the tendency is to support more international cooperation, cultural cooperation, and within the Ministry of Culture, the amount of money that was given to the residencies for organizers as well for the artists was increasing within these years. Here are some of the indicators that 56% of organizations started that they implemented residential programs in the last 5 years, and 25% of them had a tradition that was already for the past 20 years. So the Ministry of Culture actually followed this trend in a way that the support for the residencies showed an increase in more than 50% from the 2010 to the 2013. Also within the strategic plan of the Ministry of Culture, there is a tendency to support participation of artists and cultural workers in the multilateral programs fostering the development of intercultural dialogue, and I think art residencies are basically this. So within the residency, we are actually supporting all the main goals for the international cooperation, as well as promoting and giving support to development of the national and local art scene. One of the questions that was raised in this research was the question why to support residencies. And here are the main answers of the artists and art organizations. So what artists stated as their main benefit from the residency was their professional development, networking, exchange of experience, knowledge, and ideas. And these were actually the most common answers for the question. And then they also stated it was really important for them to dislocate, actually to have the experience of working and living in another environment due to the contemplation, researching, networking, and actually searching for the inspiration in the completely different circumstances. What the organizers pointed as their main benefits was the promotion of local community and cooperation with local artists, international cooperation and networking, non-commercial conditions of work, which I find are really important, and later cultural tourism, promotion of art, promotion development of the organization as well. So these last examples are actually showing something that I think it's not common to speak about, since they also in a way point to some commercial outcomes of the residencies. But in the practice of working with the OMC within the actually seeing many examples that are showing sustainable development of residencies, I think these are also some models that are good to think about how to produce a residency program that has the potential to also gain some profit, which will be then redistributed again for the artist residencies. So it will go back into the benefit of the artist and organization. Well, expectations were actually most often in common to all the parties that are involved in the residency. So these underlined here are the ones that are common to both parties, and that is production of new work, getting to know the art scene, exchange of the ideas, networking, and what is really important, and what Annemarie also pointed out, it was the possibility to present their work to the wider community. One of the questions actually tackled a really important issue, and that is the issue of financing, how to get the money to participate in the residency. So what artists stated as the main answer was that the organizer covers all the costs. That goes mostly for the artists that are participating in an international residencies. 24% of them was funded through the governmental or local administration, and 20% of them cover their own costs. As for organizations, 35% of them were funded through the ministry or through the city. 20% of them had their own funds, and 15% shared the costs with the partner organizations. This actually pointed to a really important issue that Mr. Veron also pointed, and it is the partnership and the cooperation. So 69% of organizations implement their residential programs in a partnership with other organizations. And therefore, the subject of networking also comes into focus, which actually enables all the parties to be involved in partnerships. Almost the same amount of organizations had a long-term basis for the organization of residencies, and 94% of them are also doing other activities, not only art residencies. That is also showing the diversity of art organizations and their programming, which are not only residencies, but all the other activities in which the artists that are in the residency actually take part in. What the research showed is that most of these residencies are for the visual artists, as well as on the part of artists, as well, also in the as the part of the organizations, and also visual literature and literary translations as well. So, having in mind this ratio, I think it is important to give support to other fields that are less involved in residencies, and they are not organized as the other art fields, and they don't get support as other art fields. So both the artists and organizations have confirmed that residencies most often last 1 month. This is showing actually the trend of decreasing the time spent in the residencies. So the residencies that were sometimes for 6 months or a year, that was actually time that was suitable for longer research, is decreased due to the lack of funding. And many artists gave responses that they stay in residencies that is for 7 days. And I think in terms of this really short residency, one must think about completely different structuring and expectations from both sides. So the general objective, I think, is really well known, so I would like to go to specific objectives. And these are to facilitate continuous and systematic support to residential programs, both by creating residential centers in Croatia and by supporting participation of national artists in residencies abroad. And to reduce imbalance between national artists going abroad for residential programs and foreign artists coming to Croatia. To facilitate quality networking to the benefit of all included stakeholders. So it is important to actually point to all the stakeholders in the process, which are not only the artists and organizations. They can also be some new partners which are coming from different sectors, from non-art scene as well. And to prompt the creation of new models and new partnerships in the context of pushing the boundaries between different artistic forms, institutional and out-of-institution artistic practice, the use of new skills and technologies, and so on. So I think there are some measures that need to be taken to accomplish these goals. And these are to prompt the establishment of residential centers, to prompt interdepartmental cooperation, as well as intersectoral cooperation, which is to be accomplished by cooperation between businesses and cultural entities, and by cooperation with different artistic areas. And at last, to facilitate a more flexible system of support which follows the dynamics of development of the artistic and cultural scene. I would also like to point to some problems that were shown as the results of the research. Many of the answers were actually pointing to the lack of knowledge and lack of cooperation between the very national scene. So one thing that really was a huge surprise for me is that a country like Croatia with 4 million people actually has many of the artists and organizations that don't know each other. They rarely get a chance to cooperate, and I think this forum is a great opportunity to all of us to get to know each other and to perceive each other as partners in this process.
Thank you, Ivana. Thank you very much. Thanks. Yes, please exchange again. A little bit of exercise for two of you. I'm sorry for that. Thanks, Ivan. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conversation about the possible measures, both from the ministry and the other levels today and tomorrow. But now let's go further, probably to the European level, and have really a pleasure to present Ms. Yvette Vaughan Jeunes, who is now Executive Director of Visiting Arts from London, which is an organization that really helps artists to work worldwide. Do you need some help with yes, please. Within her long career within the arts, she was the director of, for instance, she was the director of the cultural program for Cardiff 2005 and worked for Arts Council of Wales. Ms. Vaughan Jeunes has been actively involved in European culture policy debates, before as a policy manager in Brussels for the Wales Centre, and now as a really active member of the Cultural City Network and the UK representative of EU Working Group on Cultural Mobility, same as Ivana. Is everything? Yeah, always the technical stuff. Okay. It will work out. We can take that.
Not to worry, that's
just
just the title. I just said, I think I said something like, time for a new paradigm. And of course the disadvantage in going nearly last is that everybody said everything. Well, it still lost the title. That's not the important bit. Never mind. I can't remember what I put, but something like time for a new paradigm. Because I think it's time to rethink residencies. We're in a very different position, and it's not going to go back to normal. Residencies are a very high investment in one person, with relatively, and you're not going to like what I'm saying, and this is one of the problems, with relatively low impacts. Now, this is controversial. To the individual artist, to the individual artist, they're very important impacts, and there are a lot of ripple effects. But still, from a policy point of view, you're putting a lot of money into one person. In an international sense, there's a very high carbon footprint of moving lots of people around the world. But I'm saying you mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I said this about residencies because in the UK, it was said to me with a very straight face, very serious, what would it matter if we stopped funding residencies for 5 years or more? Who would care? Who would notice? That's what the funding body said to me. I was shocked to my boots. They are very important, but we need to have a rethink about the paradigm, the funding, and the implications and the impacts, because they're very easy to cut. Now, I'm very glad to be in Croatia where, thanks to, I suspect, a groundswell from the artists and a different context, that the Ministry of Culture is looking very positively, and you had a public statement there saying, we will put in place a policy for residencies. So I feel a little bit that I'm giving the wrong presentation, but I think what I'm saying is, when you put it in place, think of how sustainable they can be, think about how easy it is to cut them, and try and embed them in a way that makes it very difficult. So this is the subject. So, who are they for? They're not just for the artist. They are for the sector because, well, we'll go on to that, the public, the host, the neighbourhood, the city, the region, and the country. I very rarely read what's on a slide because I assume you can do that. In the OMC, the Open Method of Coordination, which I co-chair, looking at the artist residencies, we spent a lot of time, as you do, talking about definitions. You'll be glad to know I'm not going to do that. We all kind of know what they are when we look at them. It's about time, time out, time to focus. It's about space, looking at, if I'm an artist, looking at the scale of my work. Does it fill this space? How can I do that? Can I change my methods? Can I upskill? It's looking at resources, what techniques, what technologies, what kinds of things I can do. And it's looking at connections. And that's a very open word. From the point of view for the host, and this has been said before, so I'm not going to talk about it really, but it's important to articulate the advantages for the host. It's not just for the artist. So it brings something to the host organisation, whether it's diversity, inspiration, maybe it's what you're set up to do, maybe it's about the training of the wider cultural sector. And I'm using these words because these are important measures and indicators that I think we need to articulate. Improving the offer, enriching audiences, and so on. And I didn't go on to the country and nations, but we've talked about that at other times. And I wanted to mention Candace, is that right? Yes. How important some things that she mentioned almost en passant were about how the policy of New York building and planning had changed in order to accommodate artists' workshops and residencies, not just low-cost housing, which a lot of people do, but specifically artist workshops and residencies. These are the kinds of statements that come out of a residency policy that can actually affect wider policies. So the importance of articulating the impacts can't be overstated. So where are we now? And that's what we're looking at the OMC. We're looking at the current state of affairs and trends. There are new models. There are virtual residencies. There are pop-up residencies. There's short-term residencies. I'm not saying they're good or bad, but they are the new models. We're looking at the balance of incoming and outgoing residencies, and this is crucially important, and I'll talk about this in a minute. And we're looking at new funding models, everybody is, partnerships and networks. I said earlier that we talk endlessly in the UK about economic benefits. I don't think we talk about anything else. And I'm glad to hear that you don't talk about it in Croatia so much. But here are some economic benefits in case you want to put them down. So artist income. Now, this has a good and a bad side. There are artists for whom the residency is the only income. We've lost the old subsidy of teaching and other kinds of subsidies. So artist residency hop. There are downsides to that. What happens to sense of place, family? How do they make their connections? Who pays mortgages anymore? Who has building a career and looking at national insurance and pensions if constantly your income is dependent on residency hopping? You're not going to get a professional career portfolio built. So there's downsides. There's lots of access to new money. Philanthropists, banks. HSBC used to have a very interesting residency program. The city regions see artist residency as a way of attracting inward investment, looking at the attractiveness of a place for middle managers to come. And I talked earlier on, if you were here, about some of the things that we talked about in the advocacy, so I don't want to repeat myself. There's social benefits and political benefits with cultural diplomacy. We looked at success factors, not benefits. What do you need to have in place to make them successful? And funding came up front, but we also looked at good and robust information. And one of the things that I would remark upon was one of the suggestions earlier on today was about setting up a new information and sub-regional platform for information. I would urge you to look at creating a subset of the existing platform at Resartists or whatever it is. Don't set up a new one because the most difficult thing is to compare information across boundaries. Who needs more websites? We've got more websites than we know what to do with. What we need is to link and to create subsets. So have a discrete subset of an existing platform. It doesn't do anybody any good. Training, this has been talked about, but it's management of expectations, for, again, the artist, the host, the community, the city, the region, the countries, and network building and follow-up. I wanted to talk about the imbalance because one of the quick surveys we did on an EU level was to look at the impact of the recession on arts funding. Now, everybody knows there's been cuts, but if you make that a little bit more granular, what we discovered was most countries have cut substantially their international budgets, but most countries have also retained the facility to send their artists abroad. It's funny that it's kind of through the foreign ministry or through the marketing or external relations ministry, but people can generally find a way of sending their artists abroad because it's seen as good for the country, good for the nation to have the best of the artists, and they tend to be the best of the artists, however that's defined, abroad. And very, very severe cuts on bringing international artists in. And this is certainly the case in the UK to a very, very large extent. And I have to be a little bit political, but if you marry that with the recent European elections and look at the political colour of the European Parliament, I fear that some of the budget cuts that will come in the EU will also reflect this sense that we don't mind sending our best overseas to say how good we are. We're not that interested in what's out there coming in. This could have very big implications in future, and so I think we should really try and build something into our artist residency programme as a very important, not political, cultural, intercultural understanding element. Commercial approaches, this I meant not just by getting businesses involved. Have I got my 3-minute warning yet? I'm sure I have. Okay. I mean also there's a horrible expression in the UK about sweating your assets. Have you come across that? You know, absolutely squeezing every little bit of juice out of the assets that you've got. That's a better way of doing it, rather than sweating. But if you are an artist in residence, there are things that can be done on both sides. Now, this isn't about artists who have a very clear idea that they want silence, isolation, reflection. They're perfectly legitimate and they must continue. But there are other assets that artists are very willing to share: teaching, training, language skills, yoga classes, creativity, links with businesses, team building, and they should be built upon. There's also the notion of, I'm not here, I haven't been commissioned, and that's quite right, to create some work, and I talk about that a lot, but not later, not on this one. But there's nothing wrong with that lovely idea from the museum, the woman that's sitting here, the Museum of Contemporary Art, that said, we like that artist's work, we asked her if she'd like to donate. I think this is really important. I think artists should feel able to donate work, earlier work, small maquettes, small pieces of work, because I know from the point of view of visiting arts, if we had kept a piece of artwork over the 35 years of all the artists that had come through our doors, we would now be able to subsidise our entire work for the next 20 years, because some of those artists became extremely collectible and valuable. That's a really silly thing that we didn't do. Because we thought, oh, well, we can't ask them for any work. You can ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. It's not a requirement, but I think it's a really good idea in a more barter economy, but it's also a commercial approach. So creating a very good archive, library, collection of work from emerging artists who may or may not then become collectible is a good idea on both sides. The cross-subsidies and the DIY's do-it-yourself approach, that's the pop-up models. Talked here about different kinds of partnerships. These are ones that we've heard about, really exciting, really interesting. A friend of mine did a residency in an airport recently, just looking at passengers and things. I was asked, although it didn't quite work out, to organise a residency in a warship going into the Gulf. It didn't work out for various reasons, but I think they're very exciting partnerships. This is just very obvious about things that we could do. And that's really, actually I'm going to stop there. I could talk a lot more, but there are new, I'll just quickly talk about, this is an online residency program that involves artists, environmental scientists, and the community, neighbourhood. It's mapping, it's a square mile, they map the square mile, the people involved through art, can be through literature or film or whatever. And then an artist in residence comes and is asked to reflect on that material, not to become a socially engaged artist themselves, but just to use that material as the stimulus. So it's not based in a building, it's based in a square mile, and put that material online. And then one of the interesting things about it is the extended reach of that program, because there were tens of thousands of people accessing this website and looking at it. But the other interesting thing that was important is the partnerships, one of which is the local authority. And the local authority, this was not through the culture budget. It was through environment budget, through social cohesion budget, and through waste budgets. And so that was a really good example of different partnerships bringing in different funding. And it was very successful. But I think that's all I want to say, really. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yvette. Thank you. Just take a seat. Thank you. Thank you also for being partly an introduction also for Luca that will follow, bringing the European dimension into debate, I mean European policy dimension. Now, last but not least, as it is said, Luca Bergamo, Secretary General of Culture Action Europe. Been there for 2 years, brought quite a new energy to the organization, and trust me, I'm the witness to that. But really in trying to promote and put the culture as a necessary condition for sustainable development, so to broaden the thinking of arts and culture at the European level. Before that, Luca worked in many other things. I won't now count it. You can see at the website, from the ICT and the artificial intelligence to many other things. I'm saying this because it sounds really peculiar. Yeah. Thank you, Luca, for being with us.
Thanks to you for inviting me. Thanks for you for listening me. I hope. Let's say that I've been working in UN development. That's my what I'm trying to do here. It's maybe not exactly what you would expect, but Emina knows, or at least partially knows. He knows this. And I'm trying to share a view, an approach, on which base we've been working, and that I believe it is important in everyday life. So it has to do with the things that you do every day, but it normally doesn't show up in things you do every day. And I've seen much of these things in the speeches before, in the latest, as Emina noticed quite well. So the first point is we need to reflect. This is what's our time, where we are in the world. Okay. And this is something that maybe the audio, sorry. The audio of the audio. It's gone. I can tell the story. This is the population in 1810. Different color, different region of the world. The size of the population, the bubble is the size of the population, and that was the duration of life and the wealth. the resources. You see, everybody was below 30 as expectation of life. Just UK and Netherlands were doing, slightly better off. And that shows us what happens in this period of time. He's nicely speaking on that, but as you see, it's quite a different word. It's an enormously different word. Okay, it's an enormously different word. And that has implication. It's a huge implication. Demography is substantially, is fundamental. We don't think about that. And for Europe has a specific implication, which is this one. Is that the way we built our public sphere, it was based on that demography, where the majority of the people was in working age, and through the work and the labor, we were generating money to redistribute money to the rest of society. It's the welfare. That, all the things, is the Europe we are living now, today, where the majority of the people is no longer in working age. So there's a huge problem that comes together with the fact that in the last year, instead of redistributing the wealth, we have been reconcentrating the wealth. So the distribution of wealth in this 2010 is much more similar to what it was in 1930 than it was in 1976. And that means that we have an enormous problem. As a problem how an aging society can work with the public sphere, not thinking that we can resolve the problem by increasing the population, because we are too many on the surface. The second problem for Europe is this one, is that these are data which has been collected by a friend in OECD back to basically to the 16th century. This is an example. However, for 5 centuries, the world trade was dominated by the Western countries. The Western part of the world has been dominating the rest of the world, setting the agenda. What is today is no longer that. So this part of the world is no longer the one that decides how the rest of the world. So that's the curve of inequality. So for Europe, where we live, this is not a crisis. Meaning for the crisis, something that when it ends, we are back at the pre-existing condition. It's a transition towards something that we don't know. And what we see is not only the European election, but these facts, it's not nice. Because we are shifting the majority of things that we consider as a public right to the private sphere, to the commerce. We need to deal with this. And while we do this, we get this data, which is interesting. This is the Eurobarometer on cultural participation. The blue is 2013, and the other color, I'm colorblind to green, so I'm not sure if it's yellow or green or whatever, it's 2007. You see that there is decline on cultural participation across Europe. Interestingly, this decline, the motivation of this decline, at least in the word of the respondent, is not depending primarily on the lack of resources, but it's depending primarily on the lack of interest or the lack of time. And finally, there are 7 years that, in parallel with the decline of cultural participation, that European citizens say they are less satisfied with the life they live. And there where you build the election results, which were visible far before. So my question is that, this is the way I see our society. Shall we still keep patching, so trying to sort out problems by, putting, a finger in a hole, a finger in a hole, a finger in a hole, or we need to do something else? And if my opinion is that we need to do something else. And what we can notice is that there are two interesting things. One is that there is a strong correlation between the perception of well-being of people and the trust in their authorities, in the governance. This is a line, and my country, Italy, is quite down, as you can imagine, this historically. And another one is that there is a correlation, an immediate correlation between well-being perceived and not being alone in life. And as you imagine, as a Europe, which is urbanized Europe, largest cities, where family nucleus are fragmented, an aging population, loneliness is one of the major issues. But on the contrary, there is a response to this. So, a different view is essential. And that this different views is for the future of this part of the world, which in my view, it's a possible fantastic future because we have all the assets in this part of the world to build a society sustainable. Because we have all the intangible assets that we have generated, which call it democracy, we call it education for all, we call it governance, we call it rights of individuals, we call it enormous investment and diffuse culture activity. But in order to do that, we need to shift the focus from the competitiveness, the economic side, to the ethic and social innovation, because we need to find a way to deal with a society that has a demographic structure in a different condition where we were not the one selling products to everybody in the rest of the world. Why that matter for you, for us? Because we need to build our motivation. And in this framework, there is a question, which is the question that you normally, when they ask what's the economic contribution to, of culture to development, the question is, why should I invest money in these things? There is another question which is not posed, but it should be posed. Why we should have public policies on culture in order to transform the society into a sustainable society? And then there is a lot of answers, much more than the economic one. And we made a mistake as a sector to accept the field of the economic motivation. And these answers look like this. Okay, doesn't matter. There is a sound of shifting. What that means, if you want to build a society with a social fabric which doesn't rip up every second, you need to develop and invest in social capital. And social capital is the relationship that we have with people, the way we interact with people. And as this social capital is resulting from the experience that we have, the experiences that people have through arts is enormously important because it helps to generate certain capacities. Because, the arts, it's one of the few experiences in human life which touch upon the people through the imagination and the feeling and become rational through a process which doesn't start from rationality, but it begins on the sense of empathy and understanding. There is an enormous role in social policies and in building cohesion through the artistic, cultural participation, the artistic creation, at the condition that the people involved in the creation understand themselves as actors of this process. So I agree 100% that the core of residencies is not the artist. It's not just the core. The residency, the core is the role that the artist plays by doing these things and how, aside of doing the creation, it links up with a community which is around. And the community can be virtual, physical, or whatever. The theory of sustainability is based on 3 blocks. We are now adding a new one. The new one is that unless we help people to develop certain skill, we won't be able to have a sustainable society in this part of the world. There's no way. Because this conflict, if we learn to compete and not to cooperate at school, we won't be able to do any of the things of it, not even to transform the economy. If we are taught to be individualistic and not part of a community, we will tear apart. And the individual participation to society, the citizenship, is through purchasing, the expenditure. And we need essential refocusing of policy which impact on the people's skills, which is education, but it's also the understanding of the role arts play with this. Third, we need to influence. We need to influence, we need to understand something. Political decision making is not the result of goodwills, a result of a fight of interest. Therefore, in order to achieve, you need to be at the table of decision making with a weight. And the weight is constituencies. Constituency means that there is a demand beyond those that directly benefit from the activity of decision making, which pushes for. Is what environmentalists did 30 years ago. We need to do the very same things around culture. If we don't do that, our argumentation, our strength at the decision making will be always not strong enough. Can you do something on that? What that implies if you assume this kind of thinking in the way you do things, you shape it, or even the way you prioritize policies? I've seen in the indicators you were showing, things that matches and things that goes in complete different direction. I understand perfectly that if residencies are just visual arts and literature, and there's not even a component of education or whatever it is, these residencies are just beneficial for the individuals that attend them. Is that a criteria? You said before, we need to open up to other sector. I agree 100%, but probably you should also imagine that one of the elements, which is part of a policy, is that whatever is residencies, there has to be a component, whatever it is, that dialogue with the society. So if I have a fantastic writers in residency, one of the bartender is there's a part of this activity which is related to be in contact with kids, with the community, people want to touch, learn, and whatever. I think that starting to adopting these kind of views, it modifies substantially the way we conceive ourselves, and we play on our own narrow things and on outside. But surprisingly, sometimes things happen. Just a few days ago, the Council of the Ministry of the European Union adopted a decision on the strategic value of cultural heritage. And if you look at what was in the past, which was economic growth, tourism, and whatever, the first motivation, which has been written by these people which are not close to us, is that it's important because play a role in enhancing the social capital, because inspire and foster citizen participation, because enhance the quality of life and the well-being. Would this change the reality? No, but this is a basis of a policy. And it's something which is coming up because someone like us as well has been pushing there with this approach, understanding the wind is changing, because the very same challenge which is posed by the radicalism and the extreme force of disruption require an answer which is necessarily looking at how we keep the society in Europe united. And this is a window that we have. We can play there or we can play not. We have been playing there for this reason. because each one of us is doing the things in life we consider important. But we don't do things just because we live now. We do things because we project ourselves in time, because we have liaison, because we belongs, because we are legacy. And our responsibility in this time of history is to do as much as we said we can to leave condition for the future generation to have a meaningful life. Because what we are inheriting of the last 50 years is a world that is collapsing. And we, as continent, have the responsibility and the tools to show to the world that there is a possible way out. And in this possible way out, what people do in arts and the culture has a big role, which is beyond the production itself, in understanding the value of this activity has in people's life. Thanks for giving the chance to tell you the story.
Thank you, Luca, very much. Please come back. Please. Thanks, Luca, for also broadening the perspective. And before, now we have some time for you also to intervene with the comments and questions. But I would just want to pose one maybe general question to all of you, or whoever is ready to answer it, because I share with Luca this optimism, if you like, or maybe this is the only way out. The other one is, of course, the total social catastrophe. But I really see, especially in arts residencies, a possible new fiber for building the societies and the community, to get the people around, to make life a little bit more meaningful than everyday running for money and survival, which is not only for artists but for many people. We face it. So I would like to go back with this question, you know, your reflections or examples on how actually the residency programs, as opposite to usual representation and market logic of the visual arts or market logic of the huge festival, etc., maybe they're not that visible and they're definitely not that expensive. But how do they actually bring back some feeling of the community, being given artistic community, but also the community around us? So it's a quite wide question, but I hope you get, so whoever you want, you mention, yeah, please.
Yeah, this is the initiative I would like to tell you before. We have, in the frame of our residence programs, we have developed a program which is called Artists Go to School. That means our artists taking part in the residence programs were asked in advance, before they came to Vienna, if they would be interested to do workshops in schools, from the primary school to the high schools. So there was no obligation to the artists to do so. And if one said, no, I would like to finish my novel, I am not ready to go to school and to do a workshop, it was accepted without any discussion. Many of the artists took this opportunity to go to schools and to work with pupils between 6, 18, 19. And this was really a huge success. And not only for the artists, it was a new experience they could make. It was a great success for the pupils. It was an enrichment for the education at all, and also for the teachers and the schools. So that we have enlarged these programs. And this was important for one reason. Our society is a migration society. And all the pupils with migration background are always a bit ashamed about their language knowledges, without any knowledge about their cultural background, and then are coming young artists from their home countries and presenting themselves as promising young artists who have to tell the world a lot, and they are presenting their own culture. And this was finally, over the years, one of our best programs we could do, and it is large, and it has a really great outcome. Now there is a new masterclass for mother tongue teachers developed after these experiences, to teach them or to bring these teachers back to their cultural backgrounds, to work with all these artists, and to develop new skills for their education in the school. And I think this is really a success, we can say. What is important for us was that these workshops in the schools were not part of the grant, they were extra paid. And I guess this is very important, because this is another task for the artists. They have to prepare themselves, they have to prepare the workshops. It's another work than writing a novel, do their paintings, preparing exhibitions, etc. But it was really a great opportunity for all involved sides.
Thank you. Yeah. Can we have a mic just here? We can take a few questions and comments from the audience, 2 or 3, and then we can come back to the table. So.
Thank you. I wanted to ask actually a practical question about the program you just described, because I have a program in Leipzig, and we have a lot of opportunities to work with youth, but inviting international artists. How did you deal with language? Oftentimes younger East Germans are not speaking English, so there's not a common language.
So we were also a bit afraid when we started this program, Artists Go to School, how we will or we can solve this language problem. So mostly it was spoken English, and of course the mother tongues of the writers, if they are from Romania, from former Yugoslavia, or so, because in these classes, especially in Vienna, we have 50% of the children are coming from the region. So, and it was finally not a problem to find an understanding. Of course, teachers were helpful. These second teachers in the classes speaking the mother tongues of the children were helping. But finally, the language was not a problem. Yeah, and maybe I can also add something to the colleague. I'm very thankful for your comment. I was deeply impressed by the presentation of Luca and also Yvette. So these are really the general problems we are faced with. But I guess we have not to forget the artist and have not to stress the artists too much. An artist alone can contribute something, but he's not responsible alone for his. We have to, and the residency is one of the really rare opportunities given to the artists to do their own work. And alone this work, and we should not forget this, is a gift to the society. And we have to give them the opportunity to do this work. Yeah? And not only to stress them with social affairs and to contribute anything else to the society. Yeah? So our program, Artists Goes to School, is a program beside the residency program. And not any artist was forced to do it. If he is interested, he was very welcome. But it is only one opportunity, and I guess artists are so stressed at the moment. Yeah, the situation of the majority of the artists all over Europe is not a good one. Yeah? And they are really fighting, surviving and not only to do their art. And then to stress them in a way, I guess we should be very careful with this fact.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose you want to just take this point.
I make absolutely no apology for talking about economic, political and social benefits. I very clearly did talk, very quickly admittedly, about benefits to the artists to do with time, to do with space, to do with resources, to do with connections. I talked about the importance of artistic inspiration. But this debate is not about that, in my view. This is about the sustainability and robustness and resilience of artist residencies as a policy, and the arguments that need to be made and the kinds of debates that need to be had. And I also said that artists who wish to be alone, to work on their own practice with no kind of connections with other people, that's perfectly fine as a model as well. These are not the issues that we're talking about. The development of the individual artist's technique and practice. This is at the core of what a number of artist residencies have been about. What I'm talking about is something different, not opposed to or in conflict with that, but it's not actually what my thesis is about. My thesis is about something else. So I don't make an apology. I, in fact, have another presentation entirely about expectations on the artist. And we coined a phrase called the middle ground. And this is a way of encouraging hosts and organizations not to ask for any kind of outcome from the artist's work. In fact, we very, very proudly said on our artist residency program with the Henry Moore Foundation, there shall be no prescribed outcomes, to give the artist the freedom. Because what we found was when we asked for outcomes, we got very bad art. Now, an artist in a residency is not on a commission. An artist on a residency is doing something different. And if you ask for a piece of work to be produced, it's generally bad. And I'll give you one example. A dancer came back from Taiwan and immediately did a performance with a tutu, block shoes and a Taiwanese costume, because immediately that was her first muddled idea of a kind of intercultural thing. 6 months later, she came out with a very, very good piece of work. We believed, and I think rightly, that artists in residence are putting themselves in a very particular position with their own practice that needs time after the residency to be digested, to be understood, and that it's actually appalling travesty to ask for art to be produced during or shortly after that residency. It's not a commission, it's a residency. So I'm very, very comfortable with talking about the artistic side of residencies, but in my view this is about policy, it's about funding, it's about creating the conditions for residencies and the arguments for residencies to be sustainable.
Thank you. Claude wanted to comment, and then I'll go back to Lilian and Kat.
Yes, on this question, it's for me it's clear. It's perhaps nobody remembers that in 1993, during Antwerpen Capital Culturelle, the slogan is art is able to change the world? The answer, art changed a little bit Antwerpen, but 25 years after, the mayor of Antwerpen now it's a nationalist, it's a very right guy, and again immigration and so on and so on and so on. On this question, the development of arts and culture policy in Antwerpen is one of the best in Belgium. Is the city of Jan Fabre, is the city of Panamarenko, is the city of some designer and some music, and change nothing. The question, the place of the artist is the dialectic question. Sorry, I'm a little bit little Marxist.
Which is fine.
Yes, you do. From this morning, you speak about all the question of one phase of the residencies, and perhaps you forget so many the face of the artist, and also the question is the place of the artist and the process of artistic on the all kind of dispositif of residencies. And in this kind, also perhaps you can have some basic residencies, I can say, to help artists and intellectual also, researcher, philosopher, to invite with some perhaps politicians if you want, but also some professional, to invite some kind of how to develop your society today with collaboration with intellectual and artists. Not to organize residencies for that. For example, the question of school. I was in past teachers also. It's a privilege of my age. Okay, I make contemporary dance in school, but not sure that all my students is going to see contemporary dance after, because the link with art, real artists, is not do. I do like a teacher, but I don't involve artists on my process, and also to not involve the possibility to see also contemporary dance on my place where I'm teaching. It's very this kind of yes, is a real dialectic. It's to involve artists on the rules, on the thinking for the future, not only, like Godard said, between professional and professional.
Okay, thank you. We go back to Ivana, just to take, Lilian wanted to comment, and Katarina.
Yes, I think I've been confused several times today, and I think I'm starting to understand why. Thanks, Yvette, because I guess I've been one of the few people in this room that actually talked about what artist residency programs can do, not just for artists, but for really the local environment. How there are hubs for cross-sectorial collaborations, for social innovation, and how they can do all of this while they still satisfy the needs of the artist. It's not a competition. And it's a very outdated dogmatic way to continuously go back to this fear. We don't need to be afraid. It's just a new shift. A new player is surfacing, and it's called the residency program. And we're for once not talking about the artists, while the artists will benefit, absolutely. But I think it's a fair moment we should have to welcome this new player and reflect on it, what it can do, because it's fucking powerful. And I tried to show this in a few slides this morning, and maybe I was absolutely not successful. I will try again, and I will have another chance in Stockholm in a week, and then I'll go to Serbia, and I will just keep on trying to get better with bringing that message out. Because it's great, you know, and we do this together, and that goes in a way back to what Luca is saying. We have to collaborate, it's not competition, so please let's just be generous and think about this together. And which is not, I don't want to silence anybody in the room, but it was very good to bring the focus back. We're here to talk about residency programs.
Thank you. Please, Katarina, I had her first.
I just need to say 2 words, because
Two
there
words,
is
okay.
a misunderstanding because of the language. Perhaps when I say you don't speak about artistic benefits, it was not the benefits for the artist, it was the benefits for the art. That it's super different, that which different shape we create by the residency program, which is a general thing, of course.
Okay, Katarina.
Thank you. I have a very short question for Ms. Podner. First, I would need a clarification because I did not hear at the beginning. Did you say 70 or 17 organizations? And the other question would be, could you elaborate a bit more on the how will you operatively work on your strategy? Will there be specific funds, concrete money put into the building of the residency programs? What kind of networks of residencies do you plan to build? Do you have already specific centers in mind? Things like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. First, I'd like to just make a short comment about something that Yvette said. So the first idea why to actually conduct a research with this mapping of residency was to have an argument to change in a way the cultural policy. So what Assistant Minister said at the beginning, we need to change the cultural policy to include residencies as priority, and to do that you have to have a clear and unambiguous argument why is this actually important and for whom is it important. So the benefits and the main goals of the residency cannot be only on one side or on two sides. You just have to be, if you have a public money that is invested into something, you need to have the public benefit, and we have to define the public actually. Who is the public? Is this a local community? Is it a national level, regional level, local level? Where can you actually see all these benefits that are perceivable? So therefore I wanted to stress the strong points of the residency that can actually be put on the agenda and said, okay, we need to invest in this because it is actually producing more benefit on maybe not even material, but really in immaterial level. So you cannot put everything into an amount of the feedback that you are getting from it. But the small country like ours needs to be positioned in a way that you can gain immaterial benefit in terms of well-being of the society, as well as improving your image in the foreign communities. So this is the first part. To answer the question, it is 17, not 70. So 17 organizations, and I think 20 or 21 artists. This is not a representable amount. I think maybe for organization it could be, but certainly not for the artists. What I actually did, I used all the connections I had, and I sent through the email the questionnaire for the organizations and for the artists, since we are financing many of the artists that are going abroad to the residency. Unfortunately, I think not even 1% of them answered the questionnaire, and many of them answered, I don't have time for your questionnaire. And I was in a shock. I just read an email and I was like, okay, fine. If you are not interested into the result, if you don't understand what is actually behind it, then we don't have the situation of cooperation, and basically I think that this perceiving us and you is the wrong position for the dialogue and for the results. So it was a shock, but I think we are getting somewhere in this area. So what is practically going to be done? The strategy needs to be written. To write the strategy, I personally find myself really involved into pushing the importance of the residency to become a separate line on financing. To give you a precise answer whether this is going to happen or not, unfortunately I cannot do that because I'm not in a position to do so. I would be really happy that something like this happens, as well as to establish an artist residency center, but I don't see that the Ministry of Culture can be founder of something like this, not as a primarily founder of the residency. So going back to something that Yvette said about the change of trends and circumstances, what I think the role of the ministry should be is to enable support to make partnerships with other organizations and to give a framework that can be that can enable such a center to develop. And I think it is really something that is important for Croatia.
Thank you. And we have just time for one more comment and question. You wanted to? Anybody? No. Okay, and then we will go back to the here. If you want to say something.
Hello? Sorry. I just wanted to. I was very happy to receive your questionnaire, Ivana, and it actually, answering your questionnaire gave me a lot of personal insight also to the program that I had already produced with lots of Croatian artists. One thing that I could perhaps suggest that could be quite interesting would be, if it's possible, also to follow up with some of these artists, is about one thing that a lot of you spoke about, which is the kind of trickle, the thing that happens after the residency, because the processing of the information, of the experience that an artist has when they're abroad, when they've left their hometown maybe for the first time, or they've left their country, and they're immersed in another environment with a lot of other international artists as well. Oftentimes the results of those, that experience is, well, it's not quantifiable statistically for certain, but it comes with the collaborations that happen down the road. Just a couple of examples, like Petra Grossak came to our residency in Leipzig, and now she is collaborating with a German artist to make another exhibition both in Croatia and also in Leipzig. And so these relationships go on. Currently, some German artists have flown to New York to exhibit with artists that they met in the residency project. And these are things that they no longer have anything to do with the residency, no longer have anything to do with me, but it's these relationships that take place. And that's aside from discussing the incredible content that can take place when an artist is taken out of their normal context and their lives are completely in an upheaval and they've been turned upside down, and they can have completely new ideas and new directions in their work. During our residency, we had artists that were strict painters. They had never done anything else in their life, and suddenly they were collaborating on video works or performance works with other artists. And these are things that can't be expressed in statistics. These are stories. And perhaps stories is something that the Ministry of Culture also should look at or listen to.
Thank you. So we go back to the table just for, I will restrain myself for the final comment, and we'll ask you for the final comment before we go to speak. No, please. Luca, you wanted to speak. You need the one, you can dance.
Yes, I can dance.
Yes, okay, please dance.
No, I just, the word gift, I have a problem with that things in this way. Why? Do you think that Bach is more a gift to humanity than Niels Bohr or Einstein? I don't think so. No, I know, just sorry.
Is this the question?
No, but the question is, no, sorry, just I want to get back to the point. The way the Declaration of Human Rights was written, no? These two things were together. At that time, the gift to the society was the outcome. And though there are very historical reasons, I don't want to elaborate on this, but it was the outcome. In this society today, I think the gift is involving the society in the process, which has an enormous implication, because what we are asking to the society of the arts, we should ask it also to the society of science. There is a need to bring these talents, no, and the process on which talents express into the people life. It has nothing to, let's say, it's not impacting the quality of the experience of the artist, but is an additional component which not always is there, as is not in the science side. And I think this is one of the core points, Because if we look at the role that in society these expression of human being have today, it is different what has been in the past for millennia. There is a divide. So I just wanted to say that, because I think we should think more on these things, think more on the time where we are and how it changes, no? How it really changes. There's no more, a gift by God which connect us through the products to God. It's much more human being to human being, individual to collectivity, collectivity individual, and this is something that has to become a kind of mantra, I think. Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to be very practical and say I applaud the Ministry of Culture's initiative, and I think we should put together strong arguments for this separate line for artists' residencies. I think they're fantastic things, and people, as you say, grow enormously, not just as artists but as people, and we cannot quantify all those impacts. But my warning is, I think you need to build in resilience and robustness to the programme. It's very easy to cut it, so you might get a quick win now, but then you can lose it in 10 years' time. And don't just look to the Ministry of Culture to fund this initiative. Continue to find new partnerships, not just because that will help the thinking and the income. It's better, it's fun. Residencies with scientists is enormously helpful. And my final bit is keep what we call the middle ground sacred. Allow the time for digestion, reflection. Don't expect or require anything to come out for a couple of years even. It will, but the more you trample on that middle ground, the worse thing. But my main thing is applaud the Ministry of Culture, but it's not the only way.